Ms Judith Cochrane.
Thank you, Mr Principal Deputy Speaker. And firstly, I would say that Alliance concurs with the proposers of this motion that the cuts to the Northern Ireland Block Grant have caused major problems to Northern Ireland. But we should be clear that Northern Ireland isn't the only region of the UK being adversely affected by cuts. We are, however, also facing other pressures, and Northern Ireland is likely to end up in a serious financial crisis as a result. Not only are we faced with the large spending cuts, but also the looming budget uncertainty due to penalties as a result of the yet unresolved issue of welfare reform. We also have the added future funding pressure of resourcing a lower level of corporation tax, which includes both replacing the lost revenue to HM Treasury, but also investing more in skills and infrastructure. We do, however, welcome the devolution of corporation tax, but recognise that we need to have a sound strategy in place to deal with the funding pressure in order to allow us to realise the future benefits. Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, the motion refers to the proposed further cuts over the next mandate and declares its opposition to the austerity policies at the root of all of this. And again, we would concur with the thrust of this, in that the specific austerity policies of the UK Government are being forced too quickly upon us, with little balance of policies to stimulate the economy. In Alliance's 2010 manifesto, we recognised the need for the UK Government to address the deficit, but we also cautioned about the rate at which this would be done, and our advice has been borne out in events. We have seen too steep a decline in public spending across the UK, and this probably has slowed down our economic recovery. And we're continuing to caution about addressing the deficit at too fast a rate in terms of the next government. Continued deep cuts in public spending will have huge implications for the Northern Ireland Block Grant and public services and economic investments here. But instead of pleading a special case for Northern Ireland, we believe that we should be arguing for a slowdown in terms of the austerity at a UK level. And this would be more likely to have a greater positive impact on the Northern Ireland Block Grant. A slowdown in the rate of austerity could itself constitute a relative economic stimulus, especially if what would have otherwise been cut from public spending at a UK level was redirected into economically relevant areas. It's probably also worth noting that the UK economic recovery is largely being seen in terms of a fall of unemployment and a record employment level. However, there hasn't really been any increase in productivity, and indeed UK productivity levels are relatively poor by OECD standards. And this is because a lot of relatively low-paid and unskilled jobs are being created to produce the current employment levels. But it's not really healthy, and this is something that the Executive and the next UK Government really needs to address. Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, the motion also calls on the Executive to continue to defend the core public services of health and education. Again, Alliance acknowledges the importance of health and education as two key public services, but we would also add to that policing and economic growth interventions such as skills development. And would also caution in simply doing any read-across of any protection given to health and education in English public spending decisions and doing the same in Northern Ireland. We have a very different context here, and while there is a case for some degree of protection of the health and education budgets, there is significant scope for reform. And we need to be careful not to simply continue to allocate resources to a sector that is under pressure without expecting it to pursue its efficiency agenda. This is particularly clear in terms of education, where we are diverting almost £300 million per year to resource a largely segregated education system. But of course, this is not the only area that is costing us more to run due to our failure to address division in Northern Ireland. Mr Principal Deputy Speaker, if we are to effectively lobby the UK Government on any changes to the block grant, we must learn the very clear lesson from the botched initial attempts to make a pitch in the Stormont House process. Making a very loose general pitch for more resources for general public spending, especially in the context of parts of GB having deep socio-economic problems, is pointless. We need to make any pitch based around the very particular circumstances of Northern Ireland, show that we are genuinely trying to tackle the cost of division and not being reckless with public funds, and furthermore link any additional resources to specific deliverables. Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker.